Are these enterprises still struggling to operationalize AI?
Absolutely. The bar is very high. So for us, when we have a model to ask a question, write an email, if there was something or any image to be able to create it, if it is not 100% right, we can forgive that, actually adds to productivity. But for a lot of mission critical applications, this is unacceptable.
You start some experimentation, it works well. But when it tries to go to the real production environment, there it starts breaking.
People in the industry call it the last mile. Some of these hallucinations have actually haunted companies.
The operational data, for example, what now required for AI is getting very difficult to maintain.
If the size of the data increases, if you don't spend the time to be able to clean the data, it doesn't really matter how strong or how wonderful or capable those machine learning tools are. You get garbage in and garbage out. We are getting completely intoxicated about capabilities of this, and people talk about how much revenue they're generating. But they give an impression there's nothing else needed. I push a button with a model, I can do everything, right? And in reality, that's not the case and is haunting us.
The rack pipeline, they are becoming brittle to manage as we try to scale across the company.
We always overestimate the immediate implications of the technologies and underestimate the long-term implications of the technologies.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Techie Talks with Kuldeep. I'm your host Kuldeep Singh. Today we are excited to have another industry expert with us, Mr. Farshid. Mr. Farshid is the CEO and co-founder of Corvic AI. Farshid, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be part of the show.
So, Farshid, before we start our conversation, could you share about your experiences and journey so far in the technology space?
Yes, I've been very fortunate to be involved in the technology in various different aspects. I started my career in hardware, was one of the founding members of SanDisk. After that, I was in a company that developed image sensors and computer vision in the market, a company called Aptina Imaging. We work with a lot of automotive and mobile phone companies. A company was acquired. And after that, I was part of a founding team of Movidius, which pioneered AI inferencing at the edge. Company was acquired, and I joined Intel as the responsible for the edge AI inferencing at Intel. And after that, I was moved more and more towards software. A company called Katanograph, worked with a lot of smart people in pioneers in distributed graph technologies and graph neural nets. And currently, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Corvic AI. We are very excited to work with many industry experts and partners.
Mhm. So, pretty much during your experience, you have moved from hardware to the software to the AI, and not only the testing, but how you can implement as well as the scale the AI within the enterprises.
Correct. I've been very fortunate from right. What we are seeing right now is the third phase of I call that the AI implementation, which is more natural language driven. We call it large language models, but allows us to be able to communicate with computers and devices. The previous ones were vision, where face recognitions, all the applications was coming through. And before that was models that are allowing applications to be able to, for the audio, Siri, Alexa type of implementations. I've been very fortunate to be involved with all those three, and this is the more exciting one of all.
No, of course, and we see also these excitement into the enterprises. But tell me one specific thing: are these enterprises still struggling to operationalize AI? And if you think so, why do you think like they are still struggling to operationalize AI, even though they do have many smart people, big investment, etc., to scale it?
I wanted to ground this by saying that there is an incredible level of excitement and real activities that is taking place. Companies are rushing to be able to get on a bandwagon to use AI effectively in their workflows. And for most part, we see that is affecting our personally daily life. Each of us are to various degrees, either 2x or 10x more productive than we were a few years ago. Some of the mundane tasks that we were doing is done very with at ease with the tools that are available right now, and uh, it helps us to be able to be much more productive. When it comes to the enterprises, my observation is that that is the same level of excitement and same level of activities that's going on with that. The issue is that in the enterprise world, is not good enough, is not just it's just acceptable for companies that they doing um, mission critical applications. Absolutely, the bar is very high. And so for us, when we have a model to ask a question, write an email, if there was something or any image to be able to create it, if it is not 100% right, we can forgive that, right? It actually adds to productivity. But for a lot of mission critical applications, this is unacceptable. So some of those efforts are to do with making the experience at the levels that has zero errors or a lot more robust. So people are releasing applications, but releasing it first they were dogfooding themselves within their own companies. Later on, for applications that was not that critical, maybe customer service type of applications from front facings, but I still do see that we have a lot of work to do to be able to get to the um, industry and enterprise to trust to be able to deploy these in much more massive way in the industry.
No, you are correct. And what we also see is basically when you start some experimentation, it works well. But when it tries to go to the real production environment, specifically during large scale implementation and transformation, there it starts breaking. And then you start realizing, hey, much more work needs to happen to make it large scale implementation successful.
Precisely. And this is what we see that people in the industry call it the last mile. That is okay to be able to get something, a PowerPoint, quickly done, and you will be impressed with what's generated. But to get it to the point that you can get it in the hand of your customers, in the hand of your investors, or a final product, it does requires final touches that needs to take place. Definitely we see this. We see that in legal field, in financial fields, that some of these hallucinations have actually haunted companies, that people have released products that incredibly impressive, but they found out some of the citation and references which was accurately pointed out turned out to be made up, and it wasn't there, and it caused a lot of backtracking. So we have right now companies are using humans to be able to check the work of AI in that aspects, and also getting this products into the production, the final touches that the human needs to do for that. That still is very valid and is there.
So you are correct. And I think, see, overall, from the computing and all perspective, at least the companies started leveraging the cloud where they got the scaling. But as we see more and more data pipeline, whether it is related to the ETL or nowadays due to the LLM, the RAG pipeline, they are becoming brittle to manage as we try to scale across the company. Have you seen such patterns also?
Yeah, this is actually one of the. So again, I want to ground this by saying that all this vibe coding, all these abilities to be able to um, do the work that was primarily done by experts is unleash the productivity that we have never seen before. But at the same time, as we have seen that people can actually deploy these products easily, and business people could feel like superpowered in terms of software engineer experts, and But there are some challenges and issues that we are facing with, as you are seeing that people spending a lot of time on quality testing because they found out the code wasn't quite to the level when they launch it to productions, and now all of a sudden they release it to their customers. There are areas that are need to be addressed, and they have to pull in software engineers from outside to be able to fix these because we have to launch of products. We do see that people are launching products and it looks marvelous. But when it comes to the scaling and launching this product at scale, and with the volume of the data increases, there are things that are starting to break down. Costs are starting to go up. Those are some of the areas that the industry is dealing with. Obviously, every step things are getting better, but it is one of the ramifications of what we see with the productivity that has been unleashed with some of these productivity tools.
No, you are right. And also now we see because of like, the AI change as well, because till like few years back, when we used to say like AI, it was used to be like a typical machine learning. And then there was like, specific data pipeline, etc., which used to maintain. But now, because the superpower is in hands of every worker of the company, now we see also the operational data, for example, what now required for AI is getting very difficult to maintain it, and that has become a source of truth, because if your data is not correct, whatever the result we are going to predict is definitely going to be the wrong.
Precisely, one of the areas that we are seeing, um, there's an assumption that there is models that smarter the model get is going to solve all of our problems. There's absolutely a certain truth to that, that it will address some of these aspects that we talked about. This allow us to be able to automate with more efficiency, allow us to be able to remove some of these hallucinations components. But yet, along that line, um, dealing with the smaller type of the size of data and with less complexity, as opposed to dealing with a large set of data, more complex form of data that has come from various different sources, changes the equations in a way that the people who train models are very experts in this areas to deal with very large corpus of the data. But when the model is trained and is given to us to be able to use for inferencing, for us to be able to connect one file to it, 100 file to it, and to be able to analyze it is one thing, as opposed to given very large set of data with complex implementations. Each of them have their own maybe schemas. Then the work becomes the bottleneck by the we have to manage the data. We have seen this in people who are familiar with the machine learning know that very well. There are some libraries like XGBoost you probably heard, or scikit-learn. These are the libraries or tools that are used to be able to predict various, and they're wonderful. A lot of us are using them. But the issue is that if the size of the data increases, if you don't spend the time to be able to clean the data, it doesn't really matter how strong or how wonderful or capable those machine learning tools are. You get garbage in and garbage out. It's the same thing here that at the greater scales, addressing one PowerPoint or maybe a few documents or maybe 10 Excel spreadsheets is one thing. But if you have, you want to make this one into a production and you have a system that generates hundreds of PDFs a day, hundreds of Excel spreadsheet a month, then the managing that is actually the work of that takes over. And is not about just feeding it to the model to be able to take care of that. This is what we are seeing is that resurgence of service business, that a lot of the companies they start doing this work, but in order for them to be able to deploy it into production, they actually have to bring companies as a service companies to be able to do the work and finish the work and get it out there.
No, absolutely. And that's where, still that heavy lifting is required. And one more change which I specifically see is from, the data consumption, or, from the model consumption perspective. For example, earlier, maybe even with the machine learning model, I used to get an output as a dashboard or as a report, which was easy to digest. But now we see that the interface is live, that you can do chat with your data. Is it also changing enterprise workflows compared to the older models?
Definitely. So dashboarding has been very important. I was at my previous company, I was the general manager of a division, and there was a team has been working on not just for me, for the all the other experts in the teams and general managers to be able to generate reports. By the time we go to in front of our CEO and discuss our business, that dashboard was prepared. Armies of people, very capable peoples, were sprinting to be able to get these reports ready, and financial experts were putting the final touches, and the report was ready for us to be able to present and to be able to discuss. We were receiving on Sunday night, and Monday we had this review with the CEO of the company. And things have changed that from the static dashboards, now we have actually interactively, we can talk about this. And this affects the way that corporations operate as well. So it adds in terms of productivity, adds in terms of the depth of the various different aspects. In the case of a financial analysis, operational aspects, we can get into a lot more richer and deeper type of discussion and analysis. But at the same time, I think that people are learning that there are certain, you want to make sure the reports are consistent. Not if you ask a lot of these models, ask a question 10 times, you get different type of creativity into these reports. Whereas if you want to have a consistency in terms of reporting, things need to be very consistent in terms of data, is the way it's presented, the way it looks, and all of that. So those are the things that industry is working on in terms of modern dashboarding. Dashboarding is an outdated term these days because of what you can do with this. But definitely, that's just also one of the aspects that we do see affecting the how businesses operate.
No, and in this case, then you're like, the data also needs to be up to date, right? Because now where people are doing querying and then they just assume, your data is correct. And for example, the data is not up to date, or there are like missing fields, etc., then these reporting can just generate report based on it without even realizing the errors, or without even realizing that the data is incomplete, and the analysis might be wrong compared to if it would have access to the fresh and the complete data.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Again, I'm repeating the point that you have been bringing up that um, as amazing as models are, um, uh, there's a lot of work has to be done to be able to prepare the data for the models to properly do their magical work and analyze and generate reports on those data. And if the data is not prepared right, if the data uh, doesn't have the right information, updated information, curated, prepared for the models to be able to digest, is not the problem of the model to be able to address that. But as we talk about these hallucinations, are because the information is not there, and you force somebody, a model, to be able to provide an answer. So it makes up stuff, right? Because it looks at whatever that is left. So it's a lot of the work is in preparation of the data, and when the data is stored in various different places, each of them have their own formats, each of them have their own schemas, each of the data types are have their own complexities that will add to the difficulty of extracting the information, digesting that information, preparing it for the models to be able to respond.
No, you are correct. And nowadays, since you are working with multiple companies on the AI deployment or how to manage this, are there some common patterns which are emerging?
Definitely. So there are, we can break it down into various different aspects in terms of how security and privacy needs to be handled. There are certain rules for privacy if you deal with health data from financial data, and those things are there. But we need to make sure we upgrade those implementations to adhere to the new world of large language models provide for us. But in essence, the same concept of privacy and security applies, and that applies to other aspects as well. So this whole area, we call that in industry is known as harness engineering, is becoming more and more important to be able to put the governance, security rules, preparations for the everything else that it goes around our models, and becoming very important discipline for companies across the board to be able to implement, regardless of the nature of the data that they'll deal with, regardless of the nature of their business or enterprise.
No, and I think as we give this power to everybody, people would like to make sure that the results which are produced are consistent, as you described it earlier, and they can be trusted. Because the whether the output was produced by an AI or by a human being, if we don't have the trust, it is of no use. All right. So I see like lots and lots of investment are happening into the space, and eventually, the CXO are also very much interested to ride this transformation wave. But why do we still see that the AI ROI, which we define, is still lagging, despite of having this heavy investment and interest from the expert people?
Well, first of all, any kind of new technology that it comes in, like you have been involved, all of us have been involved. It takes time for it to be able to find its place and to be well grounded, and how to be used efficiently in different environments. So one is that we have been going through since 2013, when from the ChatGPT introductions and people started playing around with this. We have evolved quite a bit about how to use these effectively. It used to be about prompting, if you remember, the first 6 months. Then it was a lot of RAG conversation and fine tuning. These days are in discussions about context and discussions about agentic implementations and all of it. Definitely everything is moving forward, and there are more and more implementation taking place. But some of those requires that we are learning a lot about how to apply these, and they're removing the obstacles and inefficiencies from the system. So we still, I consider that we are in the build mode. Build mode from the hyperscalers is spending a lot of resources to be able to build the infrastructure for these things to be done. In terms of software applications or agentic applications, we have a lot. We are very inefficient. The way to use the compute power, the way to be able to use how to prompt these things, how to productionize these aspects. All of those things are part of the learnings. There's no question about the productivity that we are seeing, but in the beginning of any industry, in my perspective and my experience, is that there are more uh, grounding work that have to be done that leads to cost before we get to the point that we can actually reaping the benefits and we seeing ROI comes through. Although we are seeing some of that taking place in specific aspects of industries, companies are more efficient. Companies can develop products much faster. And there are less number of resources that are required to do this. People can tackle more number of tasks and jobs for that. But the cost of that is off, as we can get into more details about. Some of it is us, some of it in industry, but those things will eventually will plateau because it's all about business, it's all about revenue generation, it's all about profitability, and all of things. These things have to make sense.
Now you are correct, and I think eventually we will get to it. Right now, there is like, yes, of course, the productivities are improved, but most probably those are invested again in the learning because, yes, you are being efficient, but you still need to learn those things. So maybe we don't see it, but eventually we will get. But tell me some more around, hey, for example, these things are good and companies are adopting, but are there some misunderstanding as well, which companies do have about AI, which they should not?
I think so. First of all, there's a lot, and all of us are learning day by day. Uh, there is from the zeitgeist of what we see around ourselves, there's a lot of promotional activities that's going on, and people want to share their excitement. And some of them are um, people trying to market themselves. Like any other technology trends, there is hype that is created naturally because of this. Some of it is because we get excited about the new technology, and we always overestimate the immediate implications of the technologies and underestimate the long-term implications of the technologies. And in this, we have seen it with autonomous cars. We have seen it with cloud computing. We have seen it for mobile phones when they're coming to smartphones. All of these industries had gone through the same things. And the expenses that it was done on that, the complexities was bringing some of these technologies into market. Some of those are very natural to do with this. But bringing back to do with what we are seeing right now, it is true that models have enabled and helped us to be a lot more efficient. But um, that efficiency doesn't mean that we don't need help and expertise from other areas to be able to get these products off the ground. I look at myself, I might have an expertise in certain areas, and these models, these LLMs, help me to be more efficient, far more efficient in some aspects. But I think there's a perception that there's nothing else is needed, and people making these comments for some of them irresponsibly. Some of those are people trying to market themselves and show the value of themselves more than what they are. They give an impression there's nothing else needed. I push a button with a model, I can do everything, right? And in reality, that's not the case and is haunting us. I think is one thing about, as we talked about this, doing an experimentation, understanding what these things help us is very important. But understanding what are the areas we do need help and we need to bring experts from outside or rely on other companies to be able to do the work is also important. People to be able to be grounded for that. So from the folks, I see that a lot of companies are building these things, everything themselves. Um, and what they pay for it later on in terms of a scale of the technology, in terms of ability to be able to take this into production with ease, make sure this is operationally efficient, that in terms of cost, that this is leads to a profitable business. Make sure that this is doesn't break security or privacy norms. All of those things, I think that areas that people we are learning painfully throughout all of these. Um, and I am extremely positive about this space. I don't want this thing to be interpreted. I don't think that we should see this. This is not happening. But we need to see that what are the areas this helps us? What are the areas we do need help from outside? And we can bring help from outside to be able to build our complete solutions and deploy it in the market with more efficiency, as opposed to have a button, push a button, and everything is taken care of at that moment.
You are right. And that's also what we have seen. For example, when these LLM started appearing, like then there was like a rat race between the companies, of course, to release faster. And then we saw, right, they released it faster and eventually something got broken. Then there were like a security, the other concern, the output were hallucinating. And then it has fired them back. So your advice is right, most probably it has given you the superpower and you should be able to do, but you still require the companies, or you still require the expert which can help you in putting at the right place with the right guardrail at the right time, rather than thinking it afterwards.
Oh, one of the other areas I wanted to talk about is the cost, by the way, that
Mhm.
we are getting completely intoxicated about capabilities of this, but cost is out of the equation at this moment. It's all about, and people talk about how much revenue they're generating, but uh, and everybody knows that the costs are pretty high. But the assumption is that eventually we're going to get there. I'm sure we're going to get to that level of conversation as well. That needs to be addressed as well, because all these businesses need to be profitable for that matter.
No, you are absolutely correct. In the end, business learns only these two numbers: what are the gains and how much I'm going to spend. Cool. So we are towards the end of the session. Are there any specific tech stacks which are getting popular, but they are mostly underrated right now, but which will become a mainstream into the future?
I think security is one of those areas, security and privacy. A lot of efforts that are taking place, but we're assuming that somebody else is going to take care of that. I think that's one of the areas that it would be like any other trends of the industry that we see that we get excited, we do things, and later on we find that we need to do work in terms of security and privacy. From my perspective, from the data side, what I see this. Um, the, Now that we have ability to use a lot of different tools, LLMs is one of the tools. We have ability to be able to use machine learning, ability to use uh, various different databases, ability to use graph technologies, and all the analytics that it comes with this ability to be able to orchestrate among all of these tools and to do them more efficiently is actually one of the areas that need to be explored. Most of the tools that we have are work on their own domain specific languages. They have specific ways to be able to talk to these, and the way that the way the data is structured, the way the data is managed, the way that results are generated are usually in silos. That's why these things don't work together very well. And there are big companies have been trying to address and bridge the gap between machine learning and the databases. But only within their sandbox, within their environment. Now that some of those sandboxes are broken, you don't have to be necessarily on this data warehouse to be able to take advantage of this. You could actually use their data in various different places. You can assume that's going to be addressed because this company will take care of that for me, right? So that's one, the orchestration portion in terms of and orchestration goes in terms of various different aspects of retrieval of the data. That the retrieval techniques are primarily a text-based. Now that we have different modalities of data comes in, that makes things more complicated. And then the higher up level is the context generations. And context generation is very loaded terms in terms of the models, what you do inside, that's extremely important. But when you deal with the corpus of the data that is very large, it's not something that's not going to fit within the context window. It has to prepare something to do with outside to be able to prepare the data to come in. How to create the proper relationship between the data, how to be able to identify those hidden meanings and prepare the data to be able to get more in depth insights from your data. It could be from a sales perspective that you found out the list of this number of leads, but how do I find exactly the people? Much higher probability these are the people that buy from me, or somebody I'm designing a product, but I want to get to the point of these are the people. This is the product that actually resonate with the industry. It can apply to many different type of industries. Those are the areas requires much more higher level of insight generations for us to be able to handle that. And we think we mix up the reasoning that the models do with this. They're not necessarily the same things. There are different levels of reasoning that takes place. I think some of those areas that I see in front of me, and a lot of companies are trying to solve that. We have a long way to go to be able to get these things right. but it has implications across many different industries.
Yes, you are correct. And as we see, like, more and more dependence from, the user perspective is also going to this model, these privacy, making sure, like, the data is having those right catalog entry, because even if, like, the data might be there, but if your model is not able to understand, how can I make sense of this row versus, the another row, it is not going to be useful. And one fundamental difference which I see specifically after the LLMs is that LLM was generated more or less, the data which was collected during your general browsing, right? As a person who, how you used to do your personal behavior, that was more around like personal searches, personal exploration, and all. But no model has been trained where how these companies used to work and all. So that's why we see, those difference when we just start take that technology and try to implement, hey, it is not going to be, much useful from us. For example, let's just take a simple case of email writing. As a personal, I might be having like the different tones, etc., while I working with my close friends versus with, the person whom I don't work on the daily basis. A tone might be different, but when you bring the same functionality to enterprise, it do needs to have, the different bars, so that we maintain, hey, yes, this email is not coming from a person, but a person who is representing that enterprise.
Absolutely.
All right, Fasid. So these were the questions which were in my mind. Anything more you would like to share before we conclude?
I think we had a great conversations, and I think there's a lot to be discussed. But I think we addressed those areas that is right in the forefront of my thoughts on what I see every day.
All right. Now, very nice experience. And thanks a lot, Farshid, for sharing your experience as well as your view on these technology, and specifically coming from a person who has seen all these three different waves. And hopefully now AI will start creating more impact to the day-to-day work we are doing, and it is going to make us more productive and more useful as we move towards this new transition era, specifically working with the AI.
Thank you so much for including me part of your show. That's great.
All right. That's it for this episode of Techie Talks with Kuldeep. Until next time, keep learning and keep innovating. Thank you for watching.